Welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to do a shoe battle between two very cool shoes, the Alfred Sargent Moore and the TLB 121 on the Artista line. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and our channel we talk about men's dress wear. It's all about footwear, and we talk about unboxing videos, general shoe knowledge, helping you understand the industry and what's happening with your shoes. We look at shoes critically to determine whether or not they're worth the price that they charge. We compare shoe to shoe to understand which one is the best of the same category, and then I interview experts in the field to get their take as well. Check out my playlists to see all my videos. Welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to look at the Alfred Sargent Adelaide and talk a little bit about how it compares to some others. I'm going to actually break this into different videos as I do it, but I'm going to be doing them in a row. One of my watchers actually suggested that I have a categorization where I look at the last and I look at some of the structural things like the sole and things like that separately. Then I look at the quantitative measurements. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that for each of these. So I'm just going to repeat this piece in each of the videos as I compare this shoe to several others. So with that said, here we go. So the Alfred Sargent Moore is an Adelaide. It is a cap toe Adelaide. So Adelaides can come with a cap toe or it can come with a medallion toe. I've never seen them with a plain toe, but I'm sure that that's possible as well. They have heel counters usually, although that is also an option. So like there's an Edmonds Adelaide called the Cornwallis that does not have heel counters. And actually has a medallion, right? But no cap. So there's a lot of different options that you can do. As we look at this particular one, we are going to look at the last first. Now the last is a very important part of the shoe, right? It is the overall shape and is going to give you the overall impression of the shoe when it's on the ground. This is especially important for hole cuts because hole cuts have very little adornment, right? They're just a plain piece of leather. And so the last is going to be what overall is the shape of the shoe. Well, that is true on a cap toe Oxford as well. The cap toe Oxford has a cap, but the vamp here really gets its structure and shape from the last. And so you can have a hole cut shoe or a cap toe Oxford shoe that can look like a clog, or you can have one that looks like a very sleek piece of footwear. So it's important to note. So as we look at the last here, this is a good sweeping last. It has a nice line as it comes back toward the heel. Okay, so the way that it gradually goes back is really good. It has plenty of room here for your foot. So I have a relatively wide foot, and I actually sized down for this in order to be able to get it. So the ball is a little bit on the tight side, but the rest of the shoe, the volume at the front is really, really good for my foot. A little bit of pinching here on my pinky toe, which I may have to put a shoe stretcher in order to accommodate, but so far so good. The heel is nice and tight, so you get that nice splush when you put your foot in. You know, use a shoehorn, right? Everybody says that. I don't always, but what I do is I hold the back of it as I pull it onto my foot. And I do like to have the splush to make sure that my heel is secure, because nothing is worse than having the heel slide on your foot. If that happens, then you get blisters, and that sucks. So, anyway, the other thing that I really like about lasts is the way the toe is like a chisel, right? So this has this part here, it narrows, and then it has a relatively flat part here. Now it's not a square. Sometimes they'll call this a soft square. And there is a lot of variety when it comes to this in shoes. So as you look at this series of videos with the Alfred Sargent compared to the other one, you'll see that there are some that are more rounded than others and some that are quite sharp. Now that is also true here where it rises on the sides. So that can be a really big change in the shoe. So as the last goes, right, you have the way the toe is, you have the sides, Okay? And then you have the shape here, the sweeping part. Okay? And then of course you have the heel and how well that fits to your foot. Okay? Now, some shoes are going to have a high instep last and some are going to have a low instep last. What does that mean? It means that the amount of leather here can vary. A lot of times what people want is they want a shoe that has very little in the way of a V-gap, okay, where this part just comes together very, very closely. And that can look really good, but a V-gap doesn't mean that the shoe doesn't fit you well. Sometimes if you have no V-gap up here, the shoe can be much too big. So it's a real catch-22, right? I prefer to have it with very little V-gap, but at the same time, if there's no V-gap and they come together, that's sometimes a sign that the shoe is too big. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at sizing and trying to keep it in. Now, the other piece, of course, is that leather does stretch, so you could have a V-gap on day one. I have a pair of CNES Adelaides that when I first got them, the V-gap was about 1.5 inches, and now it's down to almost 0. So again, it depends on the quality of the leather and how much they'll stretch. The higher end shoes stretch less, but they still stretch. It's leather, right? So something to consider. So anyway, so that's the last. So let's look at the sole. This is part of the Alfred Sargent exclusive range and has a really nice sole. It has a beveled waist, has a blind stitch sole. Now, this is also made with an oak bark tanned sole. So the leather is very, very long lasting. I have another pair of these that I've had for about a year and the wear is about the same as this. So it just wears off the ink that you do when you wear it the first couple times, and then it will just last and last and last and last. This is now, like if you look at a JR sole, that's a double oak bark tanned, that will last longer, but this is also much better than some of your chrome tan soles or something like that is available on some other shoes. Now, how long should a sole last? This is a really, really hard question to answer because soles are really dependent on the way you walk. It's your the surface that you're walking on. It's your weight, the way you walk. Sometimes people have they walk like this. Okay, and so you can wear down the sole here, and it doesn't really matter where you wear the sole down first. Once the sole is worn down in one particular area, it's time to replace it. You can't replace part of the sole. I know some people have done things where they replace only the front half and so forth, and you can do that, and it saves some money, but it really doesn't lengthen the length of the sole because you do want to make sure that you're using the same stitch holes on the welt. Otherwise you have to replace the welt, and when you replace the welt, that actually diminishes the life of the sole a lot, which is another reason that a lot of people prefer to go to a cobbler instead of sending their shoes to the factory, because the factories have to put so many shoes through the rotation that they'll actually remove the welts and put new welts on because it's actually faster for them. So something to consider. So like when I used to send my shoes to Alden Edmonds to have them recrafted, and it's a fine practice, right? But the shoes can only be recrafted 3 times, and then after that, and I've actually had it where on the second time they were too tight, and it was because the new welt went on and it was just a little bit tighter. So food for thought. But anyway, this is the Alfred Sargent. That is the last. That is the sole. You can see the heel here has this beautiful split here with a lot of leather and a little bit of rubber. That actually helps it wear down slower, which is all about extending the life of the shoe. So that is the Alfred Sargent. So this is the TLB Mallorca 121. It is part of the Artista line, and it's on the Picasso last. What I like about this shoe is the sole work is very, very cool. I like the way that the toe is designed. It has a side rise here, It has a roundness up here, and it has a sharp edge as it goes up there. So you're actually able to kind of get the best of all worlds, kind of like the Carmina Simpson last, where it has that slope going up. It doesn't have a little bump, but and then it has the Crockett and Jones, and like this Alfred Sargent that we're comparing it to, it has the lift up on the side. So if you look there, they look pretty darn different for basically being the same kind of shoe. Now, if you look at from a length perspective, they're very, very similar. The length of the cap, the TLB has a longer cap, but not much, just about 1 centimeter or so. The TLB does not have peaks on the heel counters. They stay round. It also has a very big, wide, like ginormously wide bottom of the U, and it comes up almost like a V. I mean, it really, or like the opposite of a V, where it comes up, you know, to a peak. So that's really nice. The sole though, sole is where it's at on this shoe, and you can get this in a JR sole or in their sole. And if you look at it, it's just a lot narrower. It's a lot more formed. The bevel on this is extreme, almost a fiddleback. If it was painted, you could probably see it more as a fiddleback. And then the upper part of the sole is also very good. Now, we'll talk about the finishing a little bit later, but the finishing on this is actually really, really good. The nails, the Alfred Sargent has 1, 2, 3, 4 nails. This has 3, 6, 9, 12 nails. And they're in little groups of 3, kind of squared off. The size of the rubber piece is just a little bit larger. Not dramatically so, but enough to note, right? And but it really comes down to me to the last and how the shoe looks. And I really like the way the TLB looks. I like the sweeping line off to the side here. This actually stays as a square for quite a while, and I think that is an attractive look to it. This also has lasted shoe trees. Now you can get lasted shoe trees with the Alfred Sargent, but they are hard to get and they are expensive. So that's another area. Alfred Sargent was out of them, so I mean that means really hard to get. Now the one other thing about this, and this is what you get into when you get into the higher end, more expensive shoes, but there is a asymmetry to this shoe. Okay, it's higher. The top line is higher on the inside than it is on the outside. And I've got to tell you, I've done a lot of shoe battles with this shoe, and until I got my Gaziano and Girlings and my St. Crispins, which are new to my shoe battle rotation, I have not used them, I did not notice this. This is the only shoe in my rotation outside of those two that has a discernible asymmetry to it. And so pretty excited about that. I think it is you can really see this and how much of the hook is visible on this side versus that side. And it's a very cool thing and a very cool way to look at the shoes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the finishing on these shoes. So we're going to start with the Alfred Sargent. And I think that the Alfred Sargent has a good amount of finishing, but some of it is left intentionally plain. And so that's going to be part of what we're looking at today, is what is left intentionally plain, and what is not. So we're going to start with the pinking, right? And the pinking is the area along the cap, along the edge, along the top line. And I'm going to say that this pinking is relatively fine. I do find it helpful to actually measure the pinking, because sometimes that can help determine whether it's actually finer or not. And this is looking at like 3 millimeter pinking, and it is consistent across the whole shoe. When it comes to fudging, and fudging is along the edge here on the top of the welt, when they take that wheel and they put in that really nice pattern, there is no fudging on the Alfred Sargent at all, not even on the inside. So it's relatively straightforward. Now the sole edge itself, which is right here, okay, this has been finished. So it has a ridge at the top, and it has a ridge at the bottom, okay, and you can feel that. And then when it comes to actually by the waist where it's beveled, the sole has like a rounded edge along the edge there. So it's rounded here, or beveled, okay, and then it's ironed with the groove at the top and the bottom all the way around here. So it's like a 180 iron, and then the rest of that 270 is got that bevel shape to it. Now the heel itself, somebody used a wheel and artistically did a little finishing piece on the edge there as well. As I stated earlier, the heel cap, or the heel counter, is actually in 2 pieces, with a seam down the middle. There is stitching on either side of that seam instead of just having a plain seam. And of course there's the flap over the top as well, which is pretty common on these. The counter actually extends beyond the heel. These heels, as I said before, are actually really short, and usually they that centimeter where it is short is normally taken up by the heel actually going out there. So that's an interesting detail there. I think they wanted to make room for the bevel. That's just my opinion, but again, I'm not a shoemaker. I have no idea in terms of why they would do that, so that's just my assumption in looking at it. And of course, we said on the sole before, the sole is beautiful, has all this, you know, it has the bevel waist, and it has this, you know, blind stitch on there as well. When we look at extras, you know, there isn't a lot of hand stitching. When it comes to the skiving, and what skiving is when you put a toe cap on, and you know they don't actually have the leather going all the way underneath, so the cap doesn't go over it. They're actually joining two pieces of leather here. What they do is they thin the leather so that this gap from the cap to the vamp is as thin as possible. And I'm going to say that they did not skive this extremely thin. When I look at some of my other shoes, which I'll look at in my in the different battles here, I know that is actually thinner. Now, in terms of actually measuring it, I can't tell whether that's actually a whole millimeter of thickness or not. I will tell you that it's thicker than my tape. Okay, so I'm gonna say it's more than a millimeter, and I'm gonna use that as my judge, right? Is it thicker than the tape? Can I still feel the tape when I put the tape on top of it? And in this case, I do. So that's gonna say I'm gonna say that those edges are on the thick side, on the Alfred Sargent. In terms of other pieces, that's the last things we're gonna measure are the density of the stitches. Okay, and this is just a very, very straightforward measurement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. 4.5 stitches per centimeter across the top here. I always measure at the cap toe on Adelaide's because it's always the same. And then when it comes to the sole, this is normally 3. For the sole, it is, I'm going to say 3.5, almost 4. Almost 4 stitches per centimeter on the sole. So that is the Alfred Sargent. Now from a finishing perspective, we're going to look at the next shoe, which is the TLB Mallorca. Now this is a very lower priced shoe at $400 compared to the $690 for the Alfred Sargent. When you look at the size of the pinking is pretty small at 2 millimeters. It is, we'll get to the fudging. The fudging is definitely there. The sole edge is sanded all the way around. It's actually almost like it's beveled. When they sanded it a little bit more on the top and on the bottom than they did in the middle. It is very smooth. And then the bevel actually starts here instead of down here. So here, and then comes down. And of course this bevel waist is absolutely next level compared to the Sargent. So it's a much narrower waist. The bevel is much cleaner and much deeper than it is on the Sargent. Now the heel pad is also larger, and they do have more nails in the heel. So that's there. But now let's talk about finishing on the top of the welt. And now these have this great fudge line. Now, what's interesting about this is, like the Carmina, they have beautiful fudging, but the fudging does not go all the way to the stitches. So you have the row of stitches, and then the rest of the welt is finished with fudging, which means that they don't cover the stitches, nor are they perfectly aligned. Now they are close. They are close to aligned, but it's not a perfect cover. So when we look at the stitch density on the sole, we'll just take a quick look here. We have 1, 2, 3, 3.5, maybe 4. So very close to the Alfred Sargent that way, which is a good solid 4. And then from a from an upper density, it's also at 5. So equivalent there. So here you have a shoe for $400 versus a shoe for $590, $690. That is a pretty big difference in the overall price, and not a lot of difference in the overall measurements that we were able to look at. In terms of finishing, the finishing on the, because of the fudging and because of the waist, the finishing is a little bit stronger on the TLB, but the rest of it is really, really equivalent. And I have to say that it's amazing that you can get a shoe for $400 that is on the equivalent side with this. So like the Carlos Santos, which I did in another review, this is just amazing. It's amazing that they're able to get quite this close. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. And we'll get to our conclusion next. So in conclusion, as we look at the TLB Mallorca and we look at this compared to our Alfred Sargents, the real question comes down to which shoe is better, and furthermore, which shoe is better given the price tag. And it's very, very difficult for me to sit here and say, hey, listen, you should go with a shoe that costs 50% more because it's made in England versus Spain. Okay, and the leather quality on this seems to be very, very good. It seems to be Dananoi Vegano, and I'm not sure that it's not the same leather as on the Alfred Sargent. The Alfred Sargent feels a little bit nicer, like it might be a better cut from the skin, or it might be a higher grade of skin, but it's very, very difficult to tell. And when you look at this in the light and you look at this in the light, you see the natural full grain variation on both shoes pretty darn clearly. Now the lining on the Alfred Sargent is a step ahead. Okay, no question about that. The sole work is this may be an oak bark tan sole, and this may not be. Okay, so that is why they offer the JR upgrade with the custom program. So that is definitely a possibility that you get. Now, when you do that, you have to pay an extra 30% plus the upgrade fee for the shoes. So now, if you're putting JR soles compared to these soles, I would have to say that they're roughly equivalent. And for JR soles on this, that would be figure $120 plus $40, so that would be $160 more. So now you're talking about $560 versus the price of these, which I think is $690. So that means that they're a lot closer together. At the end of the day, the lasts are very, very similar. I do like this slope, right? This slope on the TLB last that I'm highlighting with the shoe is a very, very good slope and looks really good. Reminds me of a Graziano and Girling. Has now a little bit more sharp edges this way, right? And this way, but it is a very good looking shoe. Now, from an asymmetric standpoint, this is asymmetric. This is not. So if you start adding up the things that TLB does in their shoes that are really at consistent with things at price points double or more the value that they are, it really adds up to quite a lot. And they make good shoes. Okay, so I can't say enough good things about this. So I'm gonna declare that I would buy these. If I could only buy one, I would buy the TLB in this case. Now that said, I love the Alfred Sargents. I think that they're great shoes, and I'm really glad that I have them.